Hello, BookTube. Today begins History Week on the 2020 Library Tour. We're starting off with the first shelf, and let's get started. So, currently my history collection isn't very well organized. It's fairly random how I have it. I would like to get it more organized, but given the construction of the shelves they're currently on, it's rather difficult to do because there are some this shelf here and then two on the shelf under this one that's not the biggest, so you kind of have to go with trade paperbacks or mass markets, and in some cases it's still a tight fit. So the first book leading off the history shelves is Gay Life and Culture, A World History, edited by Robert Aldrich. This is I guess you could say, an anthology history of like looking at gay life and culture throughout the world, written by different writers rather than just Robert Aldrich. It's several, although he does have a few pieces in here as well. Quite enjoyed reading it and look forward to coming back to it. Next is a class book, or like a course book, Ancient Civilizations by Christopher Scare and Brian M. Fagan. It's published by Longman, and I picked this up from a local used bookstore, not Golden's, but another one. And yeah, I'm really interested in ancient history, and this is a really good source book for that. Next is A History of the Ancient World by Chester G. Starr. I picked this up from a friend at the library book sale one year. I haven't really had a chance to go at it, but hopefully sometime in the new year. And then we begin a whole lot of books on Alexander the Great. Alexander of Macedon, 356 to 323 BC, a historical biography by Peter Green. This is a fantastic biography of Alexander. There's a copy in the library I go to, and I checked it out a few years ago and loved it, and I've wanted one in my collection ever since. And a few years ago I picked this up and quite happy to have it. Another biography of Alexander, A Soldier, Priest, and God by F.S. Neiden. This one looks at Alexander more from a religious interpretation, sort of like Alexander's religious faith and his sort of relationship with the gods, either as a worshiper, as a competitor, and it's really good. And there's also Alexander the Great by Anthony Everett. Again, this is a really good biography. And very readable, very thriller-like, just really good. I also like how Everett approaches Alexander's death in this one, and his supposition that he likely died of malaria. And then we have By the Spear, Philip II, Alexander the Great, and the Rise and Fall of the Macedonian Empire by Ian Worthington. This is a book that's a bit more about Philip, Alexander's father, and Macedonian army that that Alexander inherited. And it's also a bit about Alexander as well. It's been a while since I've read it. Then we have The Greeks and the Persians from the 6th to the 4th centuries by Herman Bankston. I want to say I picked this up from the last Friends at the Library book sale. So I think where this one came from. And then there is Great State, China and the World by Timothy Brook. This is a fantastic look at China from the Mongol or the Yuan dynasty through to the Communist dynasty. And it's really good. It looks at like a specific incidents within each succeeding dynasty. And it's really, really good. Quite enjoyed it. Okay. And then we come back to Alexander and the Hellenistic world. Dividing the Spoils, The War for Alexander the Great's Empire by Robin Waterfield. This is a look at the War of the Diadochoi, or the successors, those generals and their adjutants who, after Alexander's death, basically fought for 30 more years to decide who would get which parts of Alexander's empire. And on. And then there's Adrian Goldsworthy's Antony and Cleopatra. And From Alexander to Cleopatra by Michael Grant. Picked this up from the same used bookstore that I picked up Ancient Civilizations. And Age of Conquest by Angelos Chaniotis. The Greek World from Alexander to Hadrian. And this is a really good book too, although I think once the book shifts to the Roman period, it's a bit weaker, I think, than the Hellenistic period is. Or it's a bit more, the subject kind of, sort of, it goes rather from like linear, it sort of goes by subject, I think. And so, wrapping up the first shelf of the History Week, Hugh Thomas's A History of the World. I picked this up from a friend at the library book sale. The cover has been pretty beaten up, and I haven't had a chance to go through this, even though I've had it for years. I probably might make a attempt at it this coming year. Book was about to fall down too. Technology in the Ancient World by Henry Hodges. This is a book that looks at technology in the ancient world from really pre-civilization, pre-writing to Rome, and it is really quite good. Very, very detailed and impressive. So I don't know what quite hit me onto the, alerted me to this book. I mean, the reason why I picked it up was because obviously I'm a writer of fantasy, and I was quite interested in what technologies the ancient world had, because that's sort of the area where I'm most interested in writing, even though I really shouldn't be bound by what actually happened. But anyway, so I picked this up. I interlibrary loaned it, and then a few years ago bought it outright. And then the last two books. Carthage by David Soren, Aicha bin Abed bin Kadir, and Heidi Slim. This is an excellent history of Carthage, although it kind of, once it gets to sort of Roman Carthage, the narrative kind of sort of slows down and isn't as well done, I think, as the Carthage itself, or independent Carthage, or Phoenician Carthage. And finally, for this first shelf, A History of the World with the Women Put Back In by Kirsten Luker and Jutta Denschel. Or Denschel, I think that's how you pronounce it. Um, so this is a relatively recent acquisition. I think either earlier this year or sometime last year I picked it up. And I picked this up because from a booktuber recommendation. And I think while the book might be, really good for like a YA audience, like young people just getting into history. For somebody who's a bit more aware, who, particularly if they've been reading more contemporary historical writing, some of this is a bit, like restating what's already known. And it's also a bit of a biographical anthology or something like that. So, a bit disappointed with it. I might come back to it eventually and have another go at it, but I was largely wanting something I think a bit more in depth, a bit more robust, and sort of rather than just small little biographies. So anyway, that was History Shelf Part 1. So I'll see you tomorrow with a continuation of the History Shelf or History Shelf Week. And I'll also have a tag up here in a few minutes. But first, I need to go have lunch because I'm doing this video a little bit earlier than I normally do. So anyway, BookTube, I'll see you in a few. Thank you. Have a great afternoon and stay safe.